Hello everybody, this is part 2 of our blog. Just to recap, in part 1 we set up a root CA and a clustered CA, both running on Windows Server 2012. This blog is going to be about getting Windows NPS services set up to run 802.1x on Cisco switches. It can also be used on many other switches, and this service can also be used to secure wireless using certificates. However, I'm not going to cover that, but you can build on later with the same setup to do wireless. However, we are going to cover cabled setup so that when somebody plugs into a switch port on one of your switches, the switch port will first authorize the computer that is on the switch to make sure that they are who they say they are, and they are actually allowed to access the switches. This can be especially useful for certain parts of the building where only certain members of a group are allowed to access the ports there. Say for instance something going to a live production environment where you don't want just anybody plugging in a PC and just going bananas on your service. That's the last thing we want. So over here we have a new server which we've just set up. This server is called NPS1 and it is a stock standard Windows Server 2012 server. It is a standard edition server. Unlike with the certificate servers where you had to use enterprise or data center, with this we are not doing any clustering, so we can get away with just using a standard server. We have done absolutely nothing on the server, bar giving it an IP address, adding it to the domain, and turning off IE enhanced security configuration, just purely because that pisses me off. So what we need to do here is we need to first add in the role. So we go into manage, add roles and features. As you can see, my mouse is playing games with me. And we want to scroll down and select this network policy and access server. We don't need any features. We only need the first one. And if required for any strange reason, we will let the server restart. Now, while this is installing, it is worth taking note that I'm only going to show how to set up one server. However, when we come to part 3 of this blog, where I set up the client and the switches, you'll notice that there is 2 servers. The second server is set up exactly the same as the first server, so it seems pretty pointless to make a video to do exactly the same thing again. So if you pay attention in this one, set up this server, and then rewind, log on to the second server, and do exactly the same thing again, you'll be able to get 2 servers up and running. Now, to make it more brief, I'm going to pause the video while this is installing, and we shall see you when it starts again. And we're back. So that took about 2 minutes to finish. So let's close that. As you can see, it's a little slow. I've given it very minimal resources in this lab environment. It will work like this in production, but I would suggest giving it a bit more than that. Okay, so let's get this going. I'm going to pause this while this opens quickly. And there we go. Now the installation is pretty straightforward. We do this drop-down box. There is one that we want already. Radius for 802.1x wireless or wired connections. In our case, I'm looking for wired connections. And then let's configure. Okay, so I want one for a secure wired connection. I'm happy with that name. You're more than welcome to change it. The radius clients that you're going to be adding in here would be the switches themselves, and whatever IP address the switches are going to talk to the client on, sorry, the server on. So, excuse me, in my case it's going to be 10.255.255.254. There we go. The password that you got to put in here, this can be anything you want. If you want it to be something long or special, you can go onto a website and get a randomly generated key. In my case, I'm going to make it nice and easy. Make it the secret. The secret. Please don't use that in production, but for a lab it's okay. Oh, forgot a name. Switch 1. Okay, so we got a client. Next. Next, we need to tell it what we're going to authenticate with. So in my case, it's going to be MS Chap version 2. Point to take note here is that MS Chap version 2 works on Windows, it works on Apple, and it also works on Linux. So here we need to add a group. So what you need to do is on your domain controller, if my mouse would work, there we go. We need to create a new group, and then only the users of that group are allowed to use our specific switch ports. New group. Let's call this locked switch ports. And let's add myself as one of the members of that. Okay, so that part is done. Now let's go back to our server and let's add that group into the list. There we go. I don't use any of this. And we're done. So that'll set up everything for you. Now let's go through the last bit of the config. So there's the one that the wizard has created for you. This is a default one. We don't need this one, so I'm going to disable it. And let's just jump through the settings quickly. As you can see, there's not much here. Again, these bottom two are there by default, so let's disable those as we don't need them. And there is one setting that we'll need to change in this one. Under NAS port type over here, you'll need to set this to Ethernet. Click Apply. And click OK. So we're now 3/4 of the way there. Next thing we need to do is we need to issue this server a certificate. We'll need to open this as administrator. Get an MMC console going. And add in the local computer certificate snapping. As you can see, there are no certificates currently, so we'll request a new one. This will currently be making use of the certificate services that we set up in part 1 of this blog. If you've missed that, I strongly suggest that you go back and watch those videos. So we select the certificate that we want. This is a template, and then we click and enroll, and we hope for the best. And there we go. So now we've got our certificate. There it is. We can close that now. And we will now need to go back to our network policies. Here we go, and then under the Constraints tab, and under Authentication, we're going to remove MSChap, and then add in the certificate. Let's just make sure this is using the correct certificate. That's the certificate that we just acquired. Good. OK. OK. And there you have it. That is the NPS server set up. So what you can do for your second server, if you right click on the NPS local node over there, you can export the configuration. Then you can use the same configuration on your second, third or fourth server that you're setting up, and they'll be exactly the same as the first one. Obviously you'll still have to install the NPS role, but you won't have to go through the process of actually setting it up again from scratch. What you can do is just import this configuration and that's it. So NPS1, save the file, and there you have it. So that, folks, is exactly how you set up the NPS for this lab environment. If you're setting this up for a production environment, the only thing I'd really change is make sure that you're giving the server a bit more resources. Obviously, if you're going to have a lot of switch ports coming up and users connecting, you're going to have quite a few requests coming to these servers, and they can sometimes take a bit of a beating. But that is it. We'll see you in the next video.